Hi everybody, it's Dwillis, Kiwi Scrapper from New Zealand, and I'm here today to share my third fabric album with you. And as you can see, this is a round box, so the album inside is actually round. So it's my third fabric album, but it's my first round fabric album. And I was inspired to make a round fabric album by a lady called Margaret, and her YouTube name is 7MRST, which I guess is 7 Mrs. T, but anyway, 7MRST, and it's well worth going and having a look at her channel and subscribing to her, because Margaret does some amazing work, absolutely amazing, beautiful albums, absolutely fabulous things. So anyway, she did inspire me. I intended to do this album, but she inspired me to do it as a round album because I saw her beautiful round albums that she was making and I was just blown away by them. So I decided to make my own. Now, as you can see, this is a box, and the box contains the album, and I'll just quickly show you the box. I hope this is okay because my spotlight broke and I've got it all taped together, but it's not quite at the usual angle. But anyway, so this is a papier-mâché album. It's I covered the top with a lovely fabric, cream satiny fabric. Well, it's got a pattern on it that was off a scarf, a very long fringed evening scarf that I found in an op shop. And then over top of that I put this lovely vintage doily, which was a perfect fit. The sides just came down over the sides of the lid, and cut up a larger doily and put 1, 2, 3 bits there, put some flat back pearls on them. These are handmade flowers by myself, with different various centres. That centre actually was from Irene, Seriously Scrapping. She sent me that. And these leaves are from an old vintage Christmas decoration, and I found them last year and I decided to keep them, and I didn't touch them. This is the colour they were, so I thought they'd be perfect for this. Now the side of this, I'll have to put the camera back actually, because this is the largest hat box, papier-mâché hat box I could find in the craft shop, and believe you me, it is big. So, oops, just try and take it back there. So that's the decoration on the side. There's I covered it with cream paper from a paper collection, cream braid at the bottom, a paler ivory lace around here, and around the lid, before I put the doily on, the big doily on the lid, around the sides of the lids I put this upholstery tasselled braid, and it's in a beautiful champagne colour. So that's that. Sorry. So now, before I open this album, I'm just going to read you a quick story. This is a commemorative album, as I said to you. It's to commemorate an event that took place on the 17th of July, which is why I'm posting it up now. But this took place on the 17th of July, 97 years ago. And it was an event that baffled the world for many decades, right up until about the 1990s. Just absolutely baffled them. So I'm going to read you this, and what I'm going to read you is I actually made this up, wrote it myself. It's not copied, I wrote this myself, but it's actually taken off factual reports that happened at the event and by the people involved. So here we go. At shortly after 2 a.m. on a crisp, inky black night, the head of a family was awoken by a sharp rap on his bedroom door. Dazed at being startled out of a troubled sleep, he stood with a puzzled expression. "Wake your family up and tell them to dress," came a gruff command. "Why?" the man inquired with a worried look. "You are leaving," he was curtly informed. The man nodded his understanding and retreated back into his room to awaken his son. The family group he was responsible for consisted of 11 people in all. The man himself, his wife of 23 years, their 5 children plus 4 others, not related, but as close and loyal as any family members could be. No one was particularly surprised when they were shaken awake. Amid a flurry of sleepy protests, they stumbled out of their warm beds, shivering as they hurriedly changed clothes, the girls helping one another and assisting their mother. After 15 months, such a hasty departure to an unknown destination was something they had grown accustomed to. It was cold at this early hour, and everyone dressed as swiftly as they could. One by one, they formed an orderly queue behind their father, and then followed him silently onto the landing and down the flight of stairs. The girls carried a pillow off their beds to give a little comfort to their frail mother and sick brother during the journey ahead. The youngest girl clutched her pet Pomeranian to her chest, getting comfort from his warm body. The father's burden was somewhat heavier, for he carried his 13-year-old son, cradling him in his arms like the precious bundle he was. Carefully, he led them all down, one slow step at a time. At the bottom, he was gruffly directed down a further flight of stairs, 21 steps down into the basement. Ushered through grey painted double doors, they came to a halt in a large empty cellar room, and were told to wait whilst final preparations for their imminent departure were made. It was for their own safety, they were informed. The man requested 2 chairs, one for his wife and one for his son. 2 chairs were brought, and the father gently placed his son upon one of them and positioned himself behind the boy, one hand lightly resting on each of his son's shoulders to give him what little comfort he could. As the wife seated herself, the 4 daughters and others slipped into place around their father and behind him. The double doors were closed. Silence followed their closing, but within minutes the girls began to whisper amongst themselves and to their parents in English, though they had been told not to. They were glad to be leaving this horrible house with its high wooden fence and shuttered windows with the glass panes painted over so that they could not see outside. But as glad as they were to be leaving, anxiety was also gnawing at them. They had not been expecting this sudden move just weeks after arriving here. The 2 younger sisters exchanged hopeful whispers about England, where they had cousins who would surely take them in. Half an hour of such whispered speculation, and then the closed double door was jerked open, and 11 pairs of eyes flew immediately towards it, mirroring hopeful expectation stalked by fear. It was now just after 3 a.m. on the 17th day of July in the year of 1918. The story of this family has a fairy tale beginning, which started when a quiet, gentle 16-year-old boy met a shy, very pretty 12-year-old girl who was visiting his family home for the wedding of her older sister to his uncle. The girl's name was Alex. And here in this box, this precious box, is this lovely lady, lovely young woman, and her name is Alex. So I'm just going to take this out. It looks so pretty just nestled there. I'll just draw that up a web. I wanted to make this, this has been a story very, very close to my heart all through my growing up. I heard this tale from my mother when I was a child, and I've never forgotten it, and it has stayed with me my entire life. And I just wanted to, 97 years after the event, I just wanted to commemorate it in as beautiful an album as I could make for this family. So here we have this, my first round fabric album, and this is the beautiful Alex. And Alex was a princess, and she was a princess of Hesse, which in those days, in the Victorian era, which Alex comes from, was part of the German Empire. And, sorry, I'm just turning over the pages because I've made some notes here. I'll never remember all of this. Okay, so Alex's actual title when she was born was Her Grand Ducal Highness Princess Victoria Alex Helena Louisa Beatrice of Hesse, which was a duchy part of the German Empire, and she was the granddaughter of Queen Victoria. She was, as a young woman, sure, the first time she ever set eyes on the man that she knew she wanted to marry was when she was 12 years old. As I said, at the wedding of her older sister. She was one of 7 girls, or 7 children, I'm not sure how many were boys and girls, but her older sister was marrying this young man's, this teenager's uncle, and she'd gone over to, and was gone over to his country and was visiting there for her sister's wedding. So she was 12, he was 16, and they kind of fell in love with each other, as teenagers do. And then she went back to Germany, he stayed where he was, and they started writing to each other. Now, the next time that she saw this young man was a few years later, when she was 17 years old, and that was in 1889. And she returned to Russia, and I can't remember why she returned to Russia that occasion, probably another family wedding, because a lot of these families were interrelated, were cousins, and her and this young man met again. Now I'm going to show you a picture of the young man because he's on the back of this album. Whoops, and there he is. And he's a very good looking young man as well, and I'm sure just like she's a beautiful girl. And his name is Nicholas. So that's the back page. So, okay, so this is Alex again, we're back to her. So they met up again when she was 17, and he'd have been about 20, 22, I think, 21, 22, something like that. Oh, he was 4 years older than her, so 17, 18, 19, 20, he'd been 21. Now they decided that, well, they didn't decide, but they got to know each other. She was there for 6 weeks, and they fell deeply in love. And the problem is, as all fairy tales, there's always a snag, isn't there? And what happened was, his father refused to allow a marriage between them because he was very anti-German, and so was his wife was very anti-German as well. So they were not going to let their oldest son marry a German princess. So he tried to arrange 2 other marriages to 2 other princesses, and Nicholas staunchly refused to marry either of these young women, and said he'd rather become a monk if he couldn't marry Alex. In the meantime, Alex, over in Germany, she turned down a proposal of marriage from Prince Albert Victor, who was the oldest son of the Prince of Wales. And she refused to marry him against staunch opposition from her family. They were very strongly trying to pressurise her into marrying this man, this prince, but she had already fallen in love with the man she wanted to marry, and she was not going to have any other man. And that's just such a fairy tale thing for a girl to do in those days, in the Victorian period, especially royalty. They would normally do as they were told. Now, Alex and Nicholas were second cousins, and they shared a great-grandmother, Princess Wilhelmina. And finally, his father gave in and agreed to the marriage, but only because he was dying. Now, Nicholas's father was Tsar Alexander III of Russia, and a very, very rich and powerful man, one of the richest men in the world. So he did give in, and he was very, very sick, and he realised that he was dying, and he said that he wanted to see his son married before he died. So he did agree to that marriage, and Nicholas went to Coburg to another relative's wedding. He proposed marriage to this beautiful princess here, and she refused him. much to everybody's like, what? His consternation. But the reason she refused him, not because she didn't love him, because she did love him. She was worried about, she was a very religious girl, and she was worried about changing her religion from Lutheran to Russian Orthodoxy, which she had to do in order to marry Nicholas, the man she loved. But then her sister, who'd married Nicholas's uncle, came back and told her it was okay, there were many similarities in their beliefs, and persuaded her. So when Nicholas proposed again, she accepted his proposal. She went to Germany with her sister, taking her back, obviously going to her Russian husband, and the father gave his blessing shortly before he died. So that was a real fairy tale, and they married, and they married 25 days after the father died. The father died at just 49 years old of renal failure, and overnight this young man, who by then was 25, became one of the most powerful, richest men in the world, and the Tsar of all the Russias. And he was very, very ill-equipped for that job, because his father obviously hadn't thought he was going to die so young, and had not really taught his son how to rule. So Nicholas was woefully unprepared to rule this huge country. Okay, so especially when it had a lot of political problems at that time. So they had their first child a year after they got married, and that was in 1895. This girl was born, and obviously she's not a baby here, she's a young woman. She'd have been, I guess, about 19 in this picture when it was taken, in 1916, and this is the Grand Duchess Olga. Beautiful, beautiful girl. And in fact, a friend of her mother's actually wrote to someone and said that Olga had been a very plain child, but by the time she was 15, she was very beautiful. Now, I've seen pictures of Olga when she was a child, and she was not. No, sorry, this is the inside of my lid, and I'm going to go and show you that towards the end of it. There's all the tassels coming off there. This is the family when they were a little bit younger, and this is Olga, and she looks pretty beautiful to me for a little girl. But anyway, so that's what's said. So Olga was a very compassionate child and young woman, and a very, very bright girl, very intelligent, very caring. She did apparently have a temper, but she tried to keep it in check. And during World War I, she trained as a Red Cross nurse, and she looked after wounded soldiers. I put a heart up here because of her compassion for others. She always thought about helping other people, which not many Grand Duchesses would, I guess. So anyway, here we've got lots of tassels. This is a rolled rose that I made myself from a placemat. Got little beautiful bows. That's from a blouse I took apart. Frills. Little diamantes up here. We've got feathers. We've got lots and lots of stuff. We've got sequins, and here we've got that's some glass fringing again. That's on the front page. Here we've got a swan, and that symbolises for me that she was as graceful and elegant as a swan. She was quite a reserved young lady, quite shy like her mother. Her mother was painfully shy, which the very extrovert Russian people found very hard to deal with, because they thought that she was haughty and a snob and things like that, but apparently it was because she was very painfully shy and she didn't know how to deal with Russian people. And I suppose if you think about it, like, she married and immediately she was thrown into like being the equivalent of a queen to the whole country. So, you know, and she couldn't even speak the language, so it would have been quite hard. Now, their second child was another little girl who they called Tatiana. So this is the Grand Duchess Tatiana, and she was born 18 months after the Grand Duchess Olga. Now, these girls were brought up in a very simple lifestyle, in spite of the fact that their main home had over 1,000 rooms in it. But they were brought up to, even the servants called them by their first name, and or by affectionate nicknames. So they were brought up to be like a very simple life. They weren't brought up to be haughty princesses. They could talk to the common people. They could, mix with everybody. So that's how they were raised. Their father, although he became the Tsar of Russia just before they were born, before Olga was born, was a very, very caring and loving man, and he absolutely adored each of his children and his wife. So, yes, there's Tatiana. And Tatiana was considered by a lot of people to be the most beautiful of all the Tsar's daughters, and they had four. Um, the girls were all dressed alike. That's lovely. If you see pictures of them, they're beautiful because they're always dressed in white. Well, not always. Their day clothes weren't white, but if it was for any social occasion or official occasion, they're always dressed in white, and they look so beautiful. And all their dresses are virtually identical. These two, because there's only 18 months difference in their ages, were affectionately known as the big pair by their family, and the other two younger sisters were known as the little pair. Now, rolled satin rose here. This is another handmade flower by me. We've got a tassel here. Lots of different. I'm sorry, picking up some glue strings here. Yeah, we've got organza frills around the picture here, and other braid and other things. So organza roses or bows, and here we've got a white rose, and that to me symbolises Tatiana, because her personality, she was considered to be the most social of the four daughters of the Tsar. She wasn't as considered to be as brightly intelligent as Olga, but she was a natural born leader, and she took over every situation, and she could, if the children wanted anything from their parents, any favours granted, it was always Tatiana that they sent as their spokesperson. So that's Tatiana. Now the next child, which the Tsar was hoping against hope would be a boy, was another little girl, and this is Maria. Maria was named after his mother, who was still living at that time. Right, so this is the Grand Duchess Maria, and Maria was considered to be one of the kindest, most angelic children that there ever had been, and she was actually known as, her nickname was Mashka, but she was actually known as the Angel of Russia. And her father was actually the Tsar was quite concerned about her, because she was so angelic as a child that, she was so very, very well behaved. She just, never put a foot wrong. And one day when she was about 6 or 7, she was caught stealing biscuits off her mother's tea table, and her mother and the governess wanted to send her to bed early as punishment. And the Tsar just laughed, and he said, no, she's not to be punished. He said, I'm glad to see that, I was worried that she was going to grow angel wings, and he said, I'm so glad to see that she is a human child after all, because she was just so angelic. So down here I've put an angel, because, as I say, she was known as Russia's angel. She was a very caring girl as she grew into young adolescence. All really she wanted to do, she was a very romantic girl. She wanted to get married. She wanted to have a large family. She adored children, and she looked after her younger brother very well, like all the girls did. But anyway, this is Maria. She was taken advantage of sometimes by her younger sister, but you know, she was because she was so kind-hearted, and she was a little bit flirtatious as well. She liked to flirt with the boys when she got a bit older. She often got crushes on young men that she met. But really, this is all diamante on this trim here that I've put. We've got tassels. We've got rolled roses that I made. We've got a flower I made up here. Another flower that I made down here. Feathers. And yet another flower that I made. We've got plenty of dangles down here. Dangles, lace, lots of stuff down there. Right, so now I'm going to finish it now before I go on to the next. Before I go on to the next child. Simply because we're on to coming up for 26 minutes. So I'm going to say bye-bye, and I'm going to hopefully load this up. As a commemorative album, I would like it to be loaded up by the 17th in the Northern Hemisphere, where they lived. Okay, I'll see you all later. Bye.